We all know the Kodak story. They invented the digital camera and still went bankrupt. Why? Because even though they saw the signal and developed the first digital camera, they didn't change their strategy. Here's the reality for most leaders I talk to. You know you need to be looking 5 to 10 years ahead, but you can't. In 2026, your business may be facing its own Kodak moment. And the dangerous part is you might not even see it coming. Because your day is consumed by the now. Quarterly targets, operational fires, urgent client demands. This isn't a time management issue. It's a strategic vulnerability. By the time a shift in your market becomes urgent enough to demand attention, it's too late to strategize. You're forced into crisis management. This is the cycle. Ignore, ignore, panic. Strategic foresight is how you break this cycle. I'm Jan Mosdale. For over 20 years, I've taught strategic foresight at graduate level. Today, I help organizations turn uncertainty into strategic advantage, embedding foresight as a practical leadership capability. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what strategic foresight is, how it gives you a competitive advantage your rivals are missing, and a simple framework you can start using next week. Let's clear something up. Strategic foresight is not predicting the future, because that's impossible. No one can do that. Not me, and especially not AI. Strategic foresight is preparation. It's the structured practice of gathering information about the future today, so you can make decisions that still work tomorrow. For a leader, foresight does one thing exceptionally well. It buys you time. While others are reacting to a crisis, you're already executing a plan you built 6 months ago. Foresight isn't a feeling, it's a process. And it happens in 4 phases. Let me walk you through each one. Most leaders obsess over trends, things that are already obvious. Strategic foresight begins earlier. We look for weak signals. But what's a weak signal? It's the first indicator of a change that could become significant, but hasn't hit the mainstream yet. It could be a strange article in a niche journal, an unexpected customer behavior, a startup doing something that doesn't quite make sense yet. And here's the critical rule. Look outside your industry. If you're in banking, don't just study banks. Look at gaming, agriculture, logistics. Disruption rarely comes from where you're already looking. Now, you might be wondering, how do you tell the difference between a useless fad and a business-killing disruption? You need a filter. I use the product versus behavior test. If a new trend only changes a product, it's likely a fad or an evolution. 3D TVs changed the screen, but they didn't change how we watch movies. We still sat on the couch. And that's just a product change. But if a trend changes human behavior or a business model, that's disruption. Streaming didn't change the screen, it changed the behavior. We went from appointment viewing at 8 p.m. to binge viewing whenever we wanted. That broke the cable business model. And this is exactly where Kodak failed. They looked at the digital camera and treated it like a product change. They thought digital photos are lower quality than print, so people won't want them. But they missed the behavior change. So here's question number 1 for you. That trend that you're worrying about, is it changing a product or is it changing how your customers behave? If you want to get better at spotting these weak signals before your competitors do, I've created a free email-based horizon scanning course. Over 5 days, you'll learn exactly where to look for weak signals, how to filter out the noise, and how to turn what you find into actionable insights for your business. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Now, once you've identified these signals, you need to explore what they might mean. And that's where phase 2 takes you somewhere most leaders never go. Once you've gathered your signals, the next step is imagining. Traditional strategy assumes one future. Sales will go up 5%. Strategic foresight works differently. It assumes multiple possible futures. We ask, what if this technology fails? What if regulation changes overnight? What if customer expectations flip? The goal here isn't to be right. It's to avoid being surprised. Think of it like this. You're not trying to predict which future will happen. You're building mental muscle so that when one of these futures does happen, you're not starting from zero. You've already thought through the implications. You've already spotted the dependencies. You've already identified what would need to be true. That preparation, That's what gives you speed when everyone else is paralyzed by shock. But imagining multiple futures is useless unless you can choose between them. And that's where phase 3 flips conventional planning completely upside down. Strategic foresight isn't just about scanning trends or imagining what might happen. It's about making deliberate choices about what should happen. Instead of just asking what's next, future-ready leaders also ask, what future are we trying to create? And then they work backward, and this is called backcasting. Most planning works forward. We're here, what should we do next? Backcasting works backward. We want to be here. What needs to happen between now and then? Let me show you what this looks like. Apple in 2005 asked, what if the phone becomes the primary computing device by 2015? Working backward, if that's true in 2015, then by 2012 we need a thriving app ecosystem. If we need that by 2012, we need to launch an app store by 2008. If we launch by 2008, we need the iPhone in market by 2007 to build the user base. That's backcasting. Start with the future, work backwards to figure out what you need to start building today. When you communicate this clearly to your team, they understand not just what they're doing, but why it matters. That's how foresight turns into strategy. Now here's the problem. Most organizations stop here. They produce beautiful reports about 2035 and then change absolutely nothing on Monday morning. And that's why phase 4 is where the foresight in organizations often falls apart. Foresight without action is just a vanity exercise. But here's the thing, acting on the future doesn't mean betting the entire company on one future. It means small strategic bets, pilot projects, limited scope, clear metrics, short timelines. If it fails, you lose a little, but you gain clarity. If it works, you scale before competitors wake up. For example, a company spots a signal that clients are moving to a new platform. They don't fire the sales team and pivot overnight. They run a 90-day pilot on one product line in one region with the goal of generating 50 qualified leads. There's low risk but high clarity. If it works, they have a first mover advantage. Let me show you what happens when companies don't do this. Blockbuster had the foresight. Reed Hastings literally offered to sell Netflix to them in 2000 for $50 million. They ran the numbers, they imagined the future, they even decided streaming was coming, but they didn't act. They ran 0 pilots, no small bets. They waited for certainty. By the time streaming was obviously the future, Netflix had 10 years of learning. Blockbuster would never catch up to. The takeaway is this: don't ask, how do we change everything? Ask, what's the smallest experiment we can run this week to test this particular future? You've seen the 4 phases individually. Now let me show you what it looks like when a company uses all 4 phases together in an industry most people thought could never change. Let's look at Tyson Foods. For decades, Tyson was the king of meat. Chicken, beef, pork. That was their identity. But years ago, that team started picking up a weak signal. A small but noisy group of consumers were interested in plant-based diets. Most meat industry executives dismissed it. They thought non-meat protein was a fad, that only meat was real food. But Tyson moved to imagining. They explored a future where protein didn't necessarily come from an animal. They factored in population growth. The world would need to supply at least 20% more calories in 2030 than it did in 2018. Think about how this felt internally. Tyson executives had built careers on selling meat. Now their team was saying, we should invest in companies that want to replace us. That's uncomfortable. That's scary. Most companies would have killed the idea in a committee. But because they had a system, not just a hunch, they could make the case. They made a critical decision. They reframed their entire company identity. They stopped calling themselves a meat company and started calling themselves a protein company. Then they acted. They launched a $150 million venture fund, Tyson New Ventures. They became one of the early investors in Beyond Meat, a company that on paper looked like their enemy. But because of strategic foresight, they didn't get disrupted by the future. They bought a piece of it. Tyson didn't survive because they had a crystal ball. They survived because they had a system. Scanning, imagining, deciding, acting. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Tyson had a Foresight team and a $150 million venture fund. I don't have those resources. Fair point. Here's what you need at a minimum. 90 minutes a month, scheduled, non-negotiable. Use 30 minutes to scan, read outside your industry, talk to customers about what's frustrating them, notice the weird stuff. Use 30 minutes to imagine. Ask what-if questions with your team. Explore futures that make you uncomfortable. Use 30 minutes to decide and act. Pick one small bet, one pilot, one experiment. You don't need a team. You don't need a big budget. You need discipline. Because the companies that master Foresight don't have magical powers. They have consistent habits. So here's the thing. If you're feeling stuck in that firefighting mode I mentioned earlier, you're missing the chance to actually spot change before it hits. Watch this next video to learn a simple, practical system for shifting your daily habits so you can get ahead instead of just keeping up.